Fulton County DA Fani Willis did not take the stand again earlier today because reports from her team imply that they think that her testimony yesterday provided enough defense that efforts to disqualify her in the investigation into Donald Trump and what happened after the 2020 election in Georgia will not actually go forward, which is interesting. There's been a lot of critical analysis of her testimony, but they seem confident. But that doesn't mean that they did not have anyone testify to try to provide additional bits of evidence, including in two different areas. And we're gonna start first with questions that remain about her having reimbursed the special counsel Wade, who she had a relationship with, in cash rather than in something that provides a paper trail. Here is her father, John Floyd, explaining why exactly it is that that makes sense.
When your daughter moved or left the house that she owned, did she say anything to you about having a large savings of cash?
Oh no, See, maybe, excuse me, and Your Honor, I'm not trying to be racist, okay? But it's a black thing, okay? You know, I was trained. And most black folks, they hide cash or they keep cash. And I train. You always keep some cash. I've always kept cash, and I've told my daughter, you keep 6 months worth of cash, always.
Now, she does not keep 6 months of cash. She made very clear in yesterday's testimony that she does not do that, but that she always makes sure that she has some money. So while I think for a lot of people, it might seem a bit odd. In his longer testimony, and he testified for some time, I at least, look, maybe I'm in a bubble, maybe I'm biased. I found it to be a pretty compelling argument as to why it is that she might operate financially differently than other people. And there's another area, perhaps more important, that we will get into. And I do want to mention that he also says that Willis let him know about her relationship with Wade in 2023, which lines up with her explanation of how the timeline worked rather than those attacking her.
We might have millions of people watching this show, but you can be the difference maker because we just need 1% of our audience to be paid members, and then this show can be around forever. So you can make that difference. Click join now.
So her father, perhaps not surprisingly, testified in her defense, and I think in some areas was pretty compelling. But Trey, I'm gonna go to you. What did you think?
First of all, it's kind of funny to me because when I first heard the cash thing, my immediate response was like, oh, that's like a redneck. I know so many rednecks who did it. They didn't trust banks, you know what I mean? Bury cash in the backyard or whatever, like that type of thing. It's like, I didn't know, but honestly, it's wild. There's a lot of overlapping things like that between the two cultures more than either side would like to admit, but that's just a side note. Anyway, my thing with this whole case is like, I feel like the stakes are too high. It's too important of a thing. It's going to be that most scrutinized moment of your entire career and probably most scrutinized you'll ever have, I think, if you're in this position. And I just feel like you have to be aware of how things are going to look. Like the things are probably going to come out and how those things are going to look and how they're going to be construed. You know, as I've understood it, maybe I'm wrong, but Wade is not generally seen as being qualified for the position he has anyway. And then the amounts of money involved and then the personal relationship. And I'm not saying that there isn't an explanation for all of it. I find the whole thing pretty unfortunate, frankly, given the context of this case. And I just feel like things are too important here to not pay more attention to, how things would be perceived at the very least, even if all that is true.
Counterpoint, like, you can't deny love, you know what I'm saying? So like, I just want to throw that in there. No, I totally agree. I'm very torn about this whole story because it is a massive distraction from what actually happened. And Fani Willis on the stand did an incredible job at defending herself and like what the stakes actually are when you're talking about 19 people involved in a massive conspiracy to defraud the people of Georgia. Like, that's huge, and the country. When I see her father on the stand, I'm like, how the hell was her dad there? You know, this has gone way too far, but he made a really like kind of interesting point, and I think, to Trey's point about a redneck thing, yeah, it's a working people's thing, right? I mean, it's people who are routinely denied bank accounts or loans, or folks who don't have access to credit cards or have debt or whatnot. It's like, you keep cash on you in these emergency cases because you have to have a million things just to, get a basic account or credit card. So yeah, so I mean, again, I'm not a huge defense, but I think it does make sense. it is, yeah, it's just a total diversion from the actual issue.
Yeah, and that is infuriating. The fact that, not that you, like, if she did something corrupt, then investigate her, take her off the case, or hell, if it was a crime, actually investigate her. But how could that possibly cause the larger crime to not be investigated? But that is clearly the strategy here, the legal strategy of Donald Trump and his co-conspirators. He's being very clear about that in his social media posts about it. He wants this to cancel out what he did. But that said, there was one other witness that we wanted to focus on. That is former Georgia Governor Roy Barnes, who testified earlier today. And this wasn't about the cash thing. This was about the claim that she had already been in a relationship with Wade, and then because there would be financial benefits, she went to him to take the position rather than someone who might be better qualified or that she was not involved in a relationship with. That's sort of an important part of why they believe that she needs to be taken off this case. Well, one of the pieces of evidence here is that Roy Barnes is going to testify to is that actually that's not the case. She went to him to fill the role before Wade. Now, he declined to take it because he was worried about it being a high-profile case. He's already had experiences with violent threats, and there will almost certainly be those if you're involved in this case, considering that it's Donald Trump. So take a look at a bit of his testimony.
She asked me, said they were beginning this investigation, and she asked me if I'd be interested in being special prosecutor, to which I replied that I had mouths to feed at a law office and that I would not do that. And also, I just had a bad, well, I won't say bad because it happens from time to time, but I just had the FBI to report a fella, militia trainer, to me that said they were concerned that he was making threats against me, and because I thought it was because of the flag, but I asked him and he said no, it was because I was too close to the Jews, quote unquote. And I told D.A. Willis I'd lived with bodyguards for 4 years, and I didn't like it, and I wasn't going to live with bodyguards for the rest of my life.
So it kind of feels like that whole situation existing should be a bigger part of the conversation, that's the sort of violent anti-Semitic threats against prosecutors, which is definitely a big thing. By the way, there was a report earlier this week that threats against judges and prosecutors have more than doubled in the past couple of years. I have no explanation as to why that might be. I haven't seen any high-profile people conspiracy theorizing around judges and prosecutors, but anyway, that is his argument as to why he didn't take it, but it was offered to him, he says. So it does not appear to be the case that she thought, well, I'm just gonna give it to my boyfriend, or at the very least, it wasn't her first choice, which theoretically could be seen as a jury as arguing against what the prosecution is trying to make them believe. Trey, I'm gonna go to you for a quick comment about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Francesca. It's just it just sucks that we're talking about all of this at all, given the greater case at hand here. And like you said, none of this has any bearing on what happened there, on what Trump and all his co-conspirators did, and the implications of that for the entire country and everything. So it's just a shame that this. And then you think sometimes like, well, maybe it would be simpler because it's such a diversion. Maybe she should just be taken off of it and a different prosecutor put on this case because it is so important. But would it really be surprising if, a new prosecutor in the state of Georgia specifically, ended up somehow burying it or just not, changing the parameters of it or just kind of ruining this case? So, and, you just don't know. The whole thing is just a shame. I don't know what else to say.
I think it's just really fascinating, though, that given the threats that prosecutor was facing, and that he said that he didn't want to take on another case, and the fact that it wasn't well paid, and then you see the people who have taken this on. I mean, granted, like AG Letitia James, and then Fani Willis are obviously paid by the state. But look, these are thankless jobs that put you in the crosshairs of the MAGA movement, and they happen to be occupied by Black women. And so that shouldn't be lost on anyone, and it's certainly not lost on Trump. And definitely thank you for your service. However, stop prosecuting the protesters who want to stop Cop City in Atlanta. Thank you, bye.
Yeah, exactly. That is an interesting thing that's in common with these different AGs. The other thing is, and I learned this from Donald Trump, is that weirdly, coincidentally, they're all racist. against him. It's weird how that worked out. All of those black women are racist against him. He'll provide evidence at some point, I'm sure. He hasn't yet, but I trust him. I think that this guy's got something. Anyway, look, we don't know exactly what the timeline is going to be for the rest of this testimony, whether it will result in her being taken off of the case or Wade being taken off the case, and what that might mean for the case going forward. But it remains a possibility, a ridiculous possibility, that he could just get a state level coup free because they went to Napa Valley. So great system we've got set up here.
Thanks for watching the video, guys. We also love it if you hit the join button below, because that makes you a member, and members allow us to be independent, honest. We can be as progressive as we want, no corporate media influence, and that's all because of you guys. We love doing the show with our members. Hit the join button, become one of the Young Turks.